this out-of-print book that's tricky to get that has affected me since I read it, because it says, this is the argument, the ride he takes you on. There would have been a point where there were settled cultures, and yet there still would have been nomadic cultures. The nomadic people would have travelled to the settlements and performed there, and their performances would have been derived from shamanic rites. And shamanic rites include things like death and resurrection, transcendence of levels, awareness of different dimensions. Through this book, he posits that the profession of show business maintains within it the idea of the mystical experience, and he cites very popular examples of like what looks like shamanism in popular culture. Many of the figures that adorn your establishment, Jimi Hendrix, there's a shamanic vibe. He sets fire to shit and does weird stuff. Bowie and the androgyny, the tendency for them to die young. The shamanism, the earliest form of religion, usually connected to plant medicines, is it suggests and embraces that the shaman is an unusual figure, that they're gonna say crazy shit from time to time, that they don't live in the main part of the settlement because there can be off-key people with their communing with animals, with their taking of plants, with their visions and their ability to come back. One of the sort of archetypes that's within this thing, I guess it's the architecture and archetypes of shamanism, which it is arguing all religions are derived from, and all religions include things, not all, some, like of death and resurrection. Particularly agricultural religions need their god to die, go into the ground and then come back again, the same way you require your crop to go into the ground and come back again. In a sense, it's a way of, that you could say that religion is a way of navigating the unknown and the unknowable, and the shaman is the person that can travel between those levels. But then it argues that the role of the shaman becomes the role of the clergy, and it's a kind of castrated role. Like a clergyman, except for in like some American traditions like evangelicism, and some of the figures like say Kinnison is an example, and like even Alex Jones, as we were discussing, the evangelism is trying to bring you to a promised land. In my country in particular, religion has become very neutered. It's about just flat, banal morality, mostly speaking. There's not a lot of radical religion, which is about we're going to prioritise spiritual values over material values, otherwise we're fucked.
Why did that happen in England? What's the history behind that?
The history of it was that the rise of Protestantism comes from Calvinism and Lutheranism. There was a lot of corruption in the Catholic Church, and these Protestant breakaway movements happened in the UK. It was because Henry VIII wanted to get divorced, essentially, so they built the Church of England so that he could legitimately divorce wives, even though sometimes he did just chop off their heads as a way of resolving the same problem. And Protestantism, they say, in Northern Europe, where it's colder, that Protestantism took off. It's a bit more disciplined. It's work. It places moral and ethical values on work. And the Southern European countries are more family-oriented, more socially oriented. The Italy's, France, and Spain, where they're still Catholic, and the Northern European countries, Northern European countries, Germany, England, etc., have a little more, and generally more economically prosperous now, perhaps because that religion fits more with like capitalist models. But I guess what this book is arguing is that the reason that show business has always been attacked by the church is because it's dealing with the same forces, and it talks about how figures emerge through show business continually that represent values that are not really about entertainment. What is it you're going into the cinema for? Why are people listening to your podcast a lot of the time? For hope, for a different perspective, because they find something here that they don't find anywhere else, because the culture isn't going to give it to them, because the culture, as McKenna says, is not their friend. The culture wants them little blobs with a visor on, consuming endlessly, and if you can't participate in the economic system, we don't care what happens to you. You're going to prison, or you're going to sleep in the street, or you're going to die of an opioid overdose. That's the arse end of the type of capitalism we live within now. And I suppose what this book is, what fascinated me about it, is it's saying that without the divine, without the sacred, without some personal relationship to what you might call God, that which is beyond material, which is beyond what you can know, that which requires faith. And all of our lives are going to require faith. Even what you've said about Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu and personal discipline is the faith that I'm going to feel better if I do this.
Yeah, there's faith in that. Yeah, there's faith in the understanding of the process.
And part of the problem, I think, if you live in a materialistic and rationalistic culture, which is what, as my understanding is post-Enlightenment culture, is about individualism, materialism, rationalism. If you accept those as the driving ideas, then in the end, the only things that matter are the things that you can measure. And there's no doubt that science, technology, medicine are marvelous, magnificent tools, metrics, ways, lenses for observing the miracles of nature and the cosmos. But when they start to drive economic models, you can't make the same claims for objectivity of science when the science is a subset of an economic model. You can't make the same claim. They're only looking at what they're looking at. Who's paying for it? Who's paying for those studies? How are those clinical trials conducted? How much of the information is released? And I think that that's really what the pandemic was a lens that showed us a lot. It showed us stuff that's always happening, but it concentrated it and showed us it in an observable timeline. Normally it's too diffuse and across too many issues. Go, hey, are these guys all cooperating, collaborating and conspiring with one another to ensure that their mutual agendas are being met at the level of global corporatism, bypassing national sovereignty, not putting ordinary people's interests first? And I suppose that the reason that I'm fascinated with, spirituality in particular is because that is your private little haven. That is your sacred cathedral within yourself where you do have sovereignty there still. And sometimes I worry because the stuff I talk about, I talk about these bloody, global conspiracies, corruption, war, pandemic. And then in my life, I'm still, an affluent but normal guy. I'm getting, doing a talk at my kid's school or getting kicked out of Legoland for non-compliance at a theme park. I'm not dealing with the bloody WEF on a daily basis. I'm not challenging Klaus Schwab face to face. I'm living a normal person life. And I'm aware, and I sometimes think, fuck, am I wrong? Am I wrong? But then I talk to people that, like either you with the amount of information you've amassed through your own work or, Jeffrey Sachs or fucking Glenn Greenwald or whoever, and you think, oh shit, this is actually true. This is true. And most people's lives, they're living it. They're living with that kind of adversity. And I've been poor, I grew up without money. So I have the memory of it also. But it's not just abstract. This is not just some theory about how life should be organised. This is the slow grind, oppression and centralising of resources at a level that's totally undemocratic, that's annihilating people's lives while telling them that it's somehow benefiting people that I don't think it benefits either. I think it's it's useful to remember that this is an experiential, actual thing, not just something I do on the internet